We're edging closer to the restart, but there's just 10 more loose ends to tie up first. Let's get started.
Another race for the world's greatest driver, Juan Manuel Fangio.
Former world champion Jim Clark leapt into the lead. That's Clark's Lotus going like a bomb.
And James Hunt is the world champion by just one single point.
By being a racing driver, you are under risks all the time. And if you no longer go for a gap that exists, you're no longer a racing driver.
And that is Michael Schumacher ahead, the world champion.
To become a four-time world champion, Sebastian Vettel, Lewis Hamilton, champion of the world.
That's for all the kids out there who dream the impossible.
Max Verstappen, for the first time ever, is champion of the world.
Oh my God! Max Verstappen, you are the world champion! The world champion!
Hello and welcome to episode 26 of F1 in Review. The F1 2022 season resumes at Spa this weekend, but before we get back to that action, we've got to finish off our mid-season driver review. Hello, I'm Tom Clabon, and as ever, I'm joined by Tristan Fancourt and Angus Gallager. A reminder that you can follow myself and Tristan individually on Twitter, as well as the F1 in Review account, where we post the episodes once they've gone live on River Radio, and then also when we've uploaded them to the various podcast providers, Podfollow, Spotify, and the rest. So, as we were saying, for those who haven't listened to the last episode, we started at the top of the Drivers' Championship with Max Verstappen. We ranked him along with the next 9 drivers down, stopping at 10 on how they've done so far. So we ended last episode with Alonso. We're now on P11, Mr. Magnussen. Tristan, our thoughts on how the Dane's done so far with his return to the sport after the mini hiatus?
I feel like I'm a big Kevin Magnussen fan, actually, and I think my estimations of Magnussen going into the season were lower than I think they perhaps should have been. I've forgotten how good he is, and at the very beginning of the season, he got shot out of the gates in a blaze of glory, and I would say that he has held himself up very, very well. I mean, early on in the season, I gave him a 9, right? So, and I think I'm willing to stand by that score because he has been so I would say he's been very consistent this year, and he has certainly had some problems throughout the last 10 races, either a mix of sort of poor strategy decisions by Haas, or at times he hasn't been the best driver, but I would say that he has proved himself without a doubt coming back into the sport, and for that alone, I would say that gets him an extra bumper point, if you'd like. So I would say he's very much of a 9 at the moment, and I think Haas would agree with me as well because they have made sure that he is not leaving them anytime soon. Now he's got a lovely couple of year renewed contract with them, so he's certainly brought in. He's brought in most of the points, unfortunately. I mean, whether or not you're a Mick fan or not, that's just the reality of it. And I've forgotten how good he is at defending. And, at times he's been aggressive, and that's just the Kevin Magnussen we know and, well, I'd say love. And, that's what Haas need at the moment. They need someone to demonstrate consistently that they can get points. And I think Kevin Magnussen has absolutely done that. So, yeah, a really big fan of his at the moment. I think he was exactly what they need after the Mazepin fiasco, and really to get the fans back on side. I think he's done that with Mick as well. I think it's a good pairing. So yeah, 9 out of 10. I'd say he's a solid driver for the Haas team.
I think he's had a good season, but I think 9 is generous, if I'm honest with you. I'd say that he started very strongly, and I think that it was quite a romantic storyline of, well, the bit about Mazepin having his contract ripped up wasn't romantic, but the bit afterwards where Magnussen came in, saved the day, came back after a year out of F1, and made such a strong start. Like, we forget he qualified, I think, was it 6th in Bahrain and finished 5th in the end. He made a very strong start. He put his teammate in the shade. There was the factor of the fact that Mick Schumacher was trying so hard to match Magnussen's pace that he was crashing. That was the reason. Such was Magnussen's pace. So I'd say he's had a strong season, definitely. I'd rank him alongside what Bottas has done. And I wouldn't mind, I can't exactly remember, Tristan, what was my ranking that I gave for Bottas last time? Because I think I'd give the same to Magnussen, realistically.
Last time you gave Bottas a 7.
A 7, yeah, I'd say I'd give the same for Magnussen because strong start. The decline hasn't necessarily been due to the driver, it's been more to the car. And the fact that Haas started the season so strong, but then, as with Alfa Romeo, the development race caught up with him a little bit. But I'd still say he's had a very, very solid season so far. Shown great pace. And yeah, Haas tying him down for a multi-year deal is a good move. Because he can both drive well and he can act as a mentor to a younger driver. So for me, 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I've also given him a 7. Originally, I was going to rank him slightly lower on 6.5, but then I remember that he's been out of the sport for so long, and when you consider he was called back at last minute and did a sterling job in that first race of the season in Bahrain, scoring a P5 finish is quite remarkable, really. And yes, there's been a slight drop-off here and there, but I think he's also been quite unlucky. I remember Canada, for example, when he got that black and orange flag where, for those who don't know, once you're given that type of instruction by the stewards and the powers of Formula 1, you then have to go and take a pit stop to rectify any issues that you have that are dangerous to other competitors, so they deem. But I wasn't too convinced that was worthy of said flag. I've seen many drivers carry on with more significant damage and not be given that flag. So taking that into consideration, because I think that's happened a number of times, when you consider how long he's been out of the sport and the fact that he's beating his teammate, an individual who has such high potential, many accolades in terms of people speaking well of him, beat him quite convincingly, really, when it comes to him bringing in the bulk of the points. He scored, finishing the points 5 times compared to Mick Schumacher, which is only twice. I think he's done a pretty good job. I mean, yes, it hasn't been perfect, but what can you really expect, I think, from a man who was literally race ready in many capacities? He wasn't not racing, he was fit and able, etc. But I think the whole mental stress of that to start with and the chaotic nature of Haas moving forwards, I think he's provided some steady leadership and some stability. And as you say there, Tristan, I think it was wrong of Haas looking back with a sort of revisionist view to kick him out, really, because yes, he wasn't doing amazingly well when he was dumped, shall we say, for Mazepin, but then again, the tech wasn't really there for him to do a sterling job, and we see that when he does have the good equipment, he is a very, very dependable driver. So 7 out of 10, not perfect, but yeah, 2 thumbs up, really.
I'd say, though, just as a caveat to Kevin Magnussen, I think if Haas are able to keep their current position of 7th in the championship, because underneath them's AlphaTauri, right, for context there, if they are able to keep that position, then I think that can only be down to Kevin Magnussen, unless Schumacher has an absolutely wild second half of the season, and Magnussen has a terrible, terrible season, because Kevin Magnussen, I think, will be, a massive part. I'd say 75% the reason why Haas gets up from 10th place to 7th place in a single year, because of his, ability to get back into the sport. And for that, I think that proves him to be a really, really quality driver for different reasons than we'd maybe rate someone like, Max Verstappen. There's my 9 for Magnussen is very different for why I give someone like Verstappen a 9.
So we go one rung further down the ladder to Daniel Ricciardo. Shall we go for Angus to start with? I feel you're the more middleman when it comes to him.
Can the middleman give a low rating? I guess.
Can he?
4. Simply because, and I feel like I'm being generous there, honestly. Because he's just not hit the ground running, man. He's just not hit the ground running, and there fully was an expectation of. There was a couple of expectations, I think, before the season started. I think one of them was that McLaren would be better than what they are. We thought they looked good in pre-season testing. I remember Norris, I think, was quickest in the first test, on the first test day, and ironically at the time he said, "Oh, that means nothing. Look, we're not that fast," and he was right. So. That was one expectation we had. The other one was that Ricciardo would be a lot closer because, year 2, knows the team better, knows the routines. He'd be able to get on more of a par with him. But he's got worse. He's got worse somehow. Like, this is a man who has such like pedigree in the sport. A man who's won 8 Grand Prix, and he's just struggling so bad, and it doesn't make much sense still. And you look at his results, and he's finishing the points 4 times. He came 6th in Australia. That was a good result. But every other race, like, he's just been completely off it. Every race that they finished in the points, only one of them where Ricciardo's been in the points and ahead of Norris. He's been outclassed completely. He's just not been slow in qualifying, slow in the races. And it's just weird to see. So yeah, 4 for me, just because he's had an absolute stinker, and it's possibly costing him his future in the sport.
Angus and Tom, therefore, I think you're going to agree on lots of these points. So maybe Tom, do you want to go next? So maybe I'll try and rebalance the conversation towards the end.
Go on then. Yes, I also give him a 4 out of 10. He did a very good move in Hungary, for example, a double overtake, and there ends his good moves in Formula 1 for the season. I mean, so far, points 4 times out of 13 races, 57 points behind his teammates. He should be a lot higher up, I think, not only due to his talent, which is quite evident really, but also the car. I'm hearing now he's in a new car, give him time line has dissipated or disappeared because it is no longer viable really, and he should be up a lot higher, and I think it's costing McLaren moving forwards. I think it would be against the team's best interest, that is McLaren's interest, to keep him on for another season. I don't think there's any surprise really that we hear Zak Brown coyly speaking about mechanisms in his contract, that being Ricciardo's contract, to get rid of him early before his 2023 departure or expiry date. And really disappointing, because when he arrived, or when he was announced to replace Carlos Sainz, I thought that was an upgrade for McLaren. I thought that Norris and Ricciardo were the most exciting pairing on the grid, and it's just not turned out for whatever reason really. I think for all parties that he has to go really, but I think when it comes to the upcoming race in Spa, this could be a chance for him to change people's minds and to have one last roll of the dice, and to perhaps show Zak Brown and co why they perhaps shouldn't go for Oscar Piastri or somebody else. But it really is last chance saloon for him, I think. But I don't buy this argument as well that I've seen floated around on social media that somehow this is not Ricciardo's fault, and if Zak Brown were to dump him, it would be some sort of conspiracy plot to get rid of Ricciardo. Ultimately, he's got to be held accountable for what's been a really average, if I'm being kind, run with a team really that were looking to perhaps break into the big 2 or big 3 if you're counting Ferrari, who have just joined.
Blimey, what a scathing school report, eh? If you got handed that at the end of your year, it's the one that you would hide in the bottom of your bag at all costs until 2 months later, when your parents go rummaging around, they go, "What's this?" And you go, "Oh, don't worry, that was 2 months ago." That's old news now. Old news. Yes, the report card of Daniel Ricciardo, I think, would have at the moment a D-, or for me, I'm going to give him a 5 out of 10. I mean, the thing is, Daniel Ricciardo is such a wonderful person to have on the grid. And I don't think any of us can deny that. The smiley, happy-go-lucky, funny, genuinely funny individual. There isn't that air of arrogance that you get with people like Lando Norris, for example, who does sort of show off and that's part of his persona. Whereas Ricciardo's picked a persona which I think is more enviable, the kind, friendly, happy person that, you'd love to spend time with. But unfortunately, and it is unfortunate, that doesn't play well in top level sport. It will help you get there, trust me. That's a given. But once you're there, you then have to demonstrate that you need to stay. And if you compare Daniel Ricciardo with Lando Norris, as you say, Tom, right? I've done the maths in the other way. So you said that he scored points 4 times. Well, that means he didn't score points 9 times out of 13. 9 times. And if you compare that to Lando Norris has only not scored points 3 times. So that means Daniel Ricciardo has 3 times more pointless finishes than Lando Norris, and that's not insignificant. That's that's pretty poor. And if this was anyone else less friendly, less kind and funny, maybe our claws would be out a bit more, which I think demonstrates to you why it's so important to have a nice persona. Maybe people are more forgiving. And yes, the comments have died down now of, well, he's only bad because it's a new car. Unfortunately, it looks like McLaren is getting their claws out a bit and are eyeing up the possible future generation stars that they can nab early. And so you've got to ask yourself the question, if you've got one driver floundering and a potential to grab an up-and-coming star like Oscar Piastri, then what are you going to do? Because the other thing is, I bet Piastri costs a lot less. And so I think Daniel, at his time in McLaren, is coming to an end. But I do hope he goes back to someone like Alpine. Personally, I think that'd be a good move for him. I think it would give him an opportunity to be at a team he's performed quite well at before. But I can only judge him for what he's done so far.
And we move further down the list now to Pierre Gasly. I'll start off now. I'd give him a 4 out of 10. He scored points 3 times out of 13 races, and yes, it's been a poor start for AlphaTauri, and yes, there was a lot of concern over the Red Bull powertrain at the start of the race, but I don't think they've really got enough criticism that they deserve, really, because they are currently below Haas, which, let's remind ourselves, they were bottom of the table, Haas F1, and now have leapfrogged them, and they don't really look remotely like repeating the P3 finish of 2021 or the P1 finish of 2020, both achieved by Pierre Gasly. And yes, of course, in Formula 1, the equipment, the car is so important, but we're now looking at a driver who's 26 years old, a driver who needs to be showing the world, I think, that he is worthy of breaking out of that Red Bull Academy, because I don't think, really, if we're being realistic, he has a chance of usurping Perez or, dare I even say Max Verstappen. He needs to be showing the experience and the nous and the quality, I think, that we hear from Magnussen, or we see from Magnussen, and we see how valuable he can be. Or even Perez, we saw how valuable he was in his prime age and getting older. Hence, he got the upgrade and leapfrogged Pierre Gasly to get that second seat. But he's been linked so many times to various different constructors, Alpine, the French connection there, McLaren as well. I remember early in the season thinking he'd do a better job than Daniel Ricciardo, but looking now, I don't think he's showing us why he deserves an upgrade on AlphaTauri, or why, realistically, AlphaTauri shouldn't be seen as anything but a B team, a junior team to Red Bull. They distance themselves in terms of the name, changed from Toro Rosso to AlphaTauri, and were dubbed a sister team repeatedly by Helmut Marko and others, but they're not showing me, and by extension Pierre Gasly, a driver who's been in the sport for many seasons, are not showing me their quality and the pizzazz that they once had, really. So 4 out of 10.
Oh, Gasly, how the mighty has fallen in our scores. Gasly was put on a pedestal and last season, and deservedly so. I don't think I agree, actually, that he's got 4. I'm going to give him a 6. That's 50% more than you gave him. And that's fitting, because Gasly's got 50% more points than Yuki Tsunoda, give or take. Quick maths there. And I think that's reflective of where AlphaTauri is, because I think Gasly's done a pretty solid job this season. His mind, I think, is actually on the future and where he's going to go next, because, look, he's outgrown AlphaTauri, do you not think? It's about time that he was given a more competitive seat. I think AlphaTauri were punching above their weight rather than much else. And this year they've slipped back towards the Toro Rosso days, when they were very much towards the back of the grid. And and when you're in that position, you can only make do and try to get the best results you can. But just looking at Gasly's performance, right? He in Hungary, he went from 20th and finished 12th. In Monaco, he started 17th and finished 11th. those are good drives. And there are like we can go the other way. Like in Bahrain, he started 10th and he didn't even finish the race because the engine went bang, if you remember that. And in Britain, he started 11th and again failed to finish the race. Although that was, again, he had some problems there. But he's demonstrated some great drives, and almost in all cases throughout this season, he's finished higher than he started. Azerbaijan started 6th, finished 5th. These are good drives for an AlphaTauri this year. An AlphaTauri that isn't actually as competitive as we once hoped it would be. They had a slightly different design to Red Bull, and it's not, been as fast. And so I think he's proved himself in his consistency to be able to finish better than he started. And I respect him for that. So yeah, I think it's disingenuous to score him so low, because remember, this score isn't necessarily reflective on how many points you score. Otherwise, we'd just be basically mimicking the overall drivers table, right? So I don't know. Maybe I'm just being a bit kind on Gasly, but would you say that he's on the same level as Ricciardo? But bear in mind, you've just said how Ricciardo doesn't really deserve his seat. I would argue he's doing better than Tsunoda and deserves his seat. So yeah, I'm going to give him a 6. That's a 6 is lower actually than I've given basically any. It's lower than everyone else except from Ricciardo. So I think he fits into that space quite nicely. But time will tell. But I think he's looking now actually to go up to the next level.
I think 4 is extremely harsh. Like, come on. He's not been that bad. He's had not a great season, but I think the car has really let him down. I think he's still been not as comfortably, but still pretty comfortably better than his teammate, which is what you're asked to do in Formula 1. He also had what I thought was one of the drives of the season to go and stick it in 5th in Azerbaijan. In amongst a set of very poor results. He managed to qualify up in 6th and then finish 5th. Like, that's a hell of a drive from Gasly there. And I think, if we talk about his future and everything, I think that it's probably best for him to step out of the Red Bull stable. He won't get that Red Bull seat ever. It's it's holding him back too much. Yeah. But Helmut Marko really wants to torture him, apparently. So it's yes. I think 4 is harsh. I'm leaning towards 5.5 because he's not been spectacular, but he's not hit the heights of last season either. So room for improvement, definitely.
Well, if Gasly deserves better, where does he deserve to go to? Because in my mind, he's not good enough for McLaren. Alpine, maybe. Where would he go, do you think?
I think either of those two places, to be honest. I think those would be the most logical steps up, and there's the only thing would be Ocon and Gasly at Alpine. What will the dynamics be of that? And McLaren clearly want Piastri. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm still basing it more on last season than the year before. And I admit he's not been as good this season, but he's still got it in him. He's still a very good driver. So yeah, I still argue he deserves better, to be honest.
I mean, what you've identified there, Tom, is I think in the major criticism of daughter teams and stuff like that, because he's going to be a little bit hampered now. But could you imagine him both, that has been the most French thing ever. Alpine with Ocon and Gasly. That would be a incredible dynamic. I tried to frantically try and find when the last time a French Formula 1 team had an entirely French set of drivers, but I couldn't finish looking up in time. That just sprung to me, so that's a shame. But that would be an incredible dynamic. I mean, it would be who can be the best French driver in the French car, which would be fantastic. I don't know though. I don't know whether or not he would end up in Alpine. I would like him to. I think Alpine's a really solid choice actually for him, and it would shake the shackles of Red Bull, because as you say, Helmut Marko is tormenting him by keeping him, I don't know, firmly in the reined in, if you'd like. I think perhaps Gasly. I would have said Gasly, someone like Aston Martin or Racing Point, because Racing Point were relatively competitive. and then Aston Martin have been less than competitive. But that sort of team would be good. I think if he could try and identify someone like Aston Martin or Williams that are on an upward trajectory, then I think that's his best bet. I think going in for Ferrari is a no-go, and that includes Ferrari and the daughter teams. So that's no to Haas, and that's no to Sauber. And as they are now, Sauber, Alfa Romeo, although perhaps that's going to change given the engine rules got released, and therefore Porsche and Audi might be coming in. And then he's never going to go anywhere in Red Bull because he's currently in AlphaTauri. And so Mercedes, could he go to Mercedes and Mercedes team? Probably, but not the Mercedes team. So it would have to be, as I say, Williams or Aston Martin or McLaren, but McLaren's full. And then, of course, there's Alpine. So yeah, that's where. So I think that sort of grouping there. I'd love him to go to Alpine. As I say, I think it would be amazing for him to drive for a French team because, well, who wouldn't want to drive for a team from your home country? I think that's an incredible honour and privilege, and one I think Pierre Gasly would do well to take up the challenge for.
Does give me strong vibes of Hamilton, Button, and the McLaren. Was it 2010, 12, I think, around then? Yeah, good old. Yeah, I think that would be quite a solid pairing. But I think these rankings come back to how we view these drivers in terms of what we expected from them. And with respect to Gasly, I expected him to be beating someone like Daniel Ricciardo. I expected him to be higher than Sebastian Vettel, and he is higher, but he's joint on points. But when you consider that Vettel missed 2 races owing to COVID, that takes the sheen off it slightly. And when you consider he's behind Magnussen and Alonso, who's had retirement issues, I don't know, I expected a bit more from a driver who's been in the sport for nearly 3 years now. I think beating your teammate of Yuki Tsunoda, who is very highs and lows, very inconsistent, is kind of the bare minimum, really. But maybe I'm being slightly harsh.
Perhaps we've been spoiled by the AlphaTauri's car for the last couple of years. Because if I was to remove AlphaTauri's name and say to you, by the way, Pierre Gasly in a Toro Rosso is almost matching another driver in a McLaren. How does that sound?
It does sound a lot better, to be fair.
Problem is, AlphaTauri has been a very, very good team, and I think perhaps we've been spoiled by that. So this is the point of the averaging, though, and I have been averaging our scores. So I've created, if you'd like, at the end of this, a F1 in review drivers standings, which I hope doesn't just match the constructors and the drivers standings, because, well, that would be a bit disappointing, wouldn't it?
And we now go down to P14 or joint P13, as I mentioned just there very briefly. Sebastian Vettel, what do we make of him? We know this will be his final season in Formula 1, but how is he doing so far? And what does he need to do come Spa to rejuvenate his career and climb up a bit higher?
I reckon, in terms of rating, I'm going to give him... I was going to say 6.5, but is that like exaggerated by the fact he's retiring and it's all very sweet and all the fond memories of him come flooding back, and we've forgotten some of the underwhelming performances of the last 3 to 4 years. But he has had some standout moments this year. His drive in Imola to 8th was very, very good. Back when the Aston Martin car is better now, but it used to be an absolute dog at the start of the year. So to get 8th there was a very good achievement. I think his drive in Azerbaijan, he has this weird record in Azerbaijan that he's always finished in the top 6 there, even in the last 2 years in his dogs of Aston Martins. And he's been keeping up a bit of pace. He's been outpacing Lance Stroll. Again, you'd kind of expect that from a 4-time world champion, but still he's ticked that box. And I'm going to say, if I gave Gasly a 6, I'd say Vettel would get a 6 as well, for having some high points, not being as good as previous years, and yeah, like nothing really to shout about, but 6 I think is the rating he'll get from me.
A 6 would place him just slightly higher than Gasly on your rating and equal to my rating of him. I think you're right. I think we're being nice because he's retiring. I like the fact that he's continued to match his Azerbaijan results, especially more impressive being in the Aston Martin. But I think Vettel is not as good as he once was. He's fallen quite a lot from that sort of, even at Ferrari, he's on a bit of a downhill now, and I think he appreciates that, hence why he's retiring. I'm gonna give him the same score as Ricciardo. I'm gonna give him a 5 because he's managed to pull the dog of a car up to a level where it's semi respectable. But there's no getting around the fact that he's been, I wouldn't say that exceptional this season, pretty unmemorable, which is a real shame for someone in their last season. But hardly anyone goes out on a bang. Like that, Nico Rosberg went out on a bang, right? Beat Lewis Hamilton and went, right, that's it, no more. That's an incredible thing to go out on. So the fact that I'm not remembering Vettel for being terrible is also a good thing. Hence why he's getting a 5. I think he will be one of those drivers this year where when I come back to watch a race in 2022, I'll go, oh yeah, Vettel drove this season. Oh, that's nice. This must have been his last season. Yeah, it's kind of like that. But hopefully he can have some amazing results later on in the season, and I will be completely proved wrong. But hey, I'm not holding my breath for it, to be honest.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think Vettel is leaving the sport at the right time, really. And I think that fans of the sport, and even Vettel, more generally, will be wanting him to have a real bounce come Belgium and come the sort of second half of the season, really, because it has been underwhelming. I'll give him a 5 out of 10 as well. He's done well, points in terms of 5 times out of 13 races is good in a really dodgy car. He is beating Lance Stroll, but you would expect that from a multi-time champion. But it's a far cry, isn't it, really, from what we're used to, even at Ferrari, let alone the Red Bull days. And I think he's doing what Raikkonen should have done and left while he's still at a decent level versus while he's really on the decline. I think if he were to stay for another season, we'd be almost trying to push him out the door, going, well, you've had your time, you're keeping a seat warm for the sake of it now, and it's just forming as a blockage really for talent, be that in a Mercedes team like Nick de Vries, for example, and other drivers who are in that position really. So yes, it's going to be sad to see him go, but looking at this season so far, I can see why he's going, really. And the fact that he is just above Mick Schumacher, who we're all saying has had a really underwhelming season in many aspects, you can't square the circle of saying Vettel's been wonderful and then Schumacher's been not so good when there's only 4 points that separate them. And when you consider that they're both quite equal, I think, in terms of cars, when we look further down the season after the, I suppose, development bounce of the start. And talking about the man himself, Mick Schumacher, what would we give him then? Let's go with Angus.
Tale of two halves, really, for his season. Well, not even 2 halves, because he had 2 good races and the rest has been average. So a tale of, I don't know, like 2 12ths and then 10 12ths, if that's not a phrase. But anyway, so, I think as much as he has improved enough to show some potential and to have those couple of points finishes in Silverstone and Austria, he's crashed a lot. He's cost his team a lot of money. He's not as fast as his teammate who's been out of F1 for a year. He's struggled in many aspects. He took out his F1 dad in Miami. That's cardinal sin, that, in taking out Vettel. And his future is not yet secure as well. Now, of course, you can't let that affect the rating too much because that's like something to do with the team Haas themselves rather than like anything, like everything that Schumacher has done. But yeah, I think he's been pretty average, really. Yeah, he's been alright, but he's shown some good pace. I think, to be fair, that weekend in Austria, where he finished 6th in the race, had a strong overall feeling for the car, 7th in qualifying, got a good position in the sprint. That was nice. That was good. It was nice to see in Silverstone that he was actually racing a bit and not just settling for 8th. He wants to get past Verstappen for 7th at the time. That was encouraging to see. But I think overall he has been very average. So for me, not as average as Ricciardo, because Ricciardo's been below average, but I'm going to say 5 for Mick. Just 5.
Just 5. Tom,
just the 5.
relatively kind to Schumacher, I think, going into the last ratings that we did at the beginning. You gave him a 5. Okay. I'd be interested to know whether or not you're going higher or lower.
Well, what if I were to tell you I'm staying exactly the same, 5 out of 10? Crazy, isn't it? Yeah, he's been a real flash in the pan so far. We saw, as you say, the back-to-back points in Silverstone and Austria. Thought, here we go. This is where, we'll lit the match. It's going to go and explode into some wonderful racing. We were told that Schumacher takes a while to get going, but once he gets going, boom, watch him go. But that's not really happened, has it, when you look at the remainder of the first half of the season? And I think the gap between him and Magnussen is concerning. When you consider that Magnussen's not been in the sport, and then Schumacher's been in the sport and been at Haas for a season or so, you've got to go and think, well, should the gap really be that big? Perhaps not. I think he's really is singing for his supper in the second half of the season. I think Spa would be a good race for him to go and show his quality there, because we see how well the Haas car had previously done at somewhere like Bahrain, for example, and how good it could do in Saudi Arabia. So, power circuits, which I think it's fair to say Spa has a lot of elements for. But I am quite concerned, really, by comments coming out from Günther Steiner, for example, saying he needs to get more points, by the news that just broke today, we're recording on Monday, that Giovinazzi, my arch nemesis, my kryptonite, is returning to the sport in the form of first practice 1 driving that Haas car. When you consider that Mick Schumacher is without a contract, if this one isn't renewed come the end of it, I think he's got a lot of work to do. And part of me thought to myself, once he got those back-to-back points, he'd have proved the doubters wrong in terms of getting those points in isolation or getting some more points moving forwards. But I think if we're looking at the drivers in terms of the second half of the leaderboard, he's the one that has the biggest point to prove and needs to have the best second half of his career, really, because I can't believe I'll be saying this, but Mick Schumacher, the son of Michael, may not be in Formula 1 come next season. Him and Giovinazzi may do a switcheroony. He may be the reserve driver, that being Schumacher, and Giovinazzi, the fiend, will be returning to the sport. I hope not, but there we go.
I think this is, when reflecting on these drivers, I think you have to take the overarching emotive feeling, and I can't shake the feeling of mild disappointment. And I'm so sorry. And I know if you listen to this podcast every week, you'll go, hold on a minute, you're, touting how brilliant he is. And I know, we're very supportive of Mick. You can't be. But he scored all of his points in 2 races. That's it. And yes, like in Great Britain, there was an incredible drive from 19th to 8th. One of the best, actually, this season, and he took advantage of circumstance fantastically. But he has only scored twice, which isn't very good. And like in Canada, it was heartbreaking, starting in 6th and not even being able to finish the race. That was unfortunate. And there has been these unfortunate moments. But also, I can't help get the feeling that the taint on this season at the moment so far is being that, if he qualifies in the points, you're not sure he's going to get to the end of the race or get to the end of the race in the points. And for that, I have to give him a 4. And I think that's justifiable because I think he has been a 4. I think he has been a slightly not as good driver as we'd hope. But that's not saying that, he can't raise himself up. So I want him to. So I'm going to have to give him a 4. I think that's fair. And I think once we get to the end and that we sort these drivers by how we rank them, I think he'll fit in quite nicely. But yeah, I really hope I can score him much higher by the end of the season. Hopefully he's now got the wind in his sails a bit and he can fly high. I'm mixing analogies now. But yes, if it rains in Spa, he might do amazing in the rain. So fingers crossed, for Mick, because it'd be good to have the Schumacher name back in the sport for longer than 2 years. And we'll see where he goes from here.
And we go further down, we're creeping towards the bottom. It is Yuki Tsunoda. I'm giving him a 4 out of 10, and without repeating really my critique of Gasly and indeed of AlphaTauri, I think when you consider he's got 3 points, when you consider he's scored points 3 times out of 13 races this season compared to 5 out of 13 come this point last season, there is a clear downgrade, not only in the car but also with the driver himself. And how do I describe that? How do I explain that and justify that point? Well, he is 6 points off the F1 debutants Guan Yu Zhou, and when you consider he's 5 points off his teammates, he's really in no man's land. And for a driver who was touted as the next big thing to come out of the Red Bull Academy, he burst onto the scene, really, I think it's fair to say, going straight from F2 to F1. There were question marks about him, but he did supremely well. Highlighted, I think, by the fact he got a P4 finish in Abu Dhabi amidst the chaos of that race. He has definitely shown his talents and also shown his flaws with the fact that he could be rather shouty and sweary on the radio. But nonetheless, it was a raw talent. There was talent there to be seen, but we're not really seeing that so far this season. A P8, a P7, a P10. These are all fine occasionally, but it's not really what we were told or were teased with in last season of what may be to come, really. And I think he's got to be showing more of his worth to Red Bull, to AlphaTauri and to everybody else, because currently I think if there were another driver, and I can't say my knowledge of the Red Bull Academy is too tip-top, but if there was another Tsunoda, let's say, in the pipeline, he could easily be usurped by that Tsunoda, if that makes sense. Because as we saw with Daniel Kvyat, for example, it's not good enough to be teetering around in 16th position, having 1 or 2 good finishes in the points. You could easily get dumped for somebody else. So I think similar to Mick, he's a young talent who has potential but needs to go and show his quality come Belgium and the races to come as well.
So, what are you giving him? Last time you gave him a 5.
Oh, sorry, a 4.
Giving him a 4. Angus, what about you? You think that's too harsh? Or is Tom giving Tsunoda too much credit?
If I gave Gasly a 5.5, I'm going to give Tsunoda a 5. Because I think there's been more promise and more pace so far this season. But at this stage, he needs more than promise. He needs to start delivering results. I think that his temperament is clearly better. He's had less sweary outbursts on the radio this year, which I guess is something, right? And he seems like he's got a calmer head on his shoulders. And he started the season well. He started on Gasly's pace, if not above it. He came 7th in Imola, came 8th in Bahrain, showed some great results, was really putting in a good shift. But since he got his last points finish in Spain, and that was 3.5 months ago. Now I know that's a long time, but since he got his last point, there's been 7 more races. So he's not backed up the strong start that he had with the season. The one saving grace for him is that we're talking about the Red Bull Academy. It's not exactly stacked right now with people to come through. You look at the F2 series, you currently got the Red Bull drivers of Daruvula, Iwasa, Lawson and Hauger currently occupying 5th, 7th, 8th and 12th in the F2 Championship. Now that may change, of course. A strong second half of the season could sway their fortunes, but Tsunoda's probably lucky that there's not too many apt replacements at the moment. Of course, there is Alex Albon, but he signed a long-term contract with Williams, and I think he's officially now out of the Red Bull stable because his loan would be over. So there aren't many options to replace Tsunoda, and that will give him the saving grace, I reckon. It will give him another year. Because they clearly have high hopes for him, but high hopes that he has not yet met. And whilst he seems like a nice bloke, and an affable bloke, and also happens to be one of the shortest human beings I've ever seen, he has not yet backed up the hype with the results. And you'd argue it needs to start happening soon. But I think he has improved slightly this season. So for me, 5 out of 10.
I can't really add anything to that. I think I agree with both your points, but I'm just going to use those points and score him a 4. So, yeah, I think that sets him quite nicely for our scoring. Excellent scores and points, both of you there.
Thank you. I try my best. And we go further down to Zhou Guan Yu. I'm giving him a 5 out of 10. He's a debutant in the sport. He's got points twice out of 13 races. I think he's made a solid start for a debutant when you compare him to Mick Schumacher's first season, for example. But I think, it's understandable that he is far away from Valtteri Bottas, shall we say, in the leaderboard here. He's yet to sign a contract for Alfa Romeo, but the rumours say that's all nailed on. And I think he's made a good start, but he needs to, like with so many of these young drivers, carry on that and be a bit more consistent to boost that up from a 5, I'd say.
Well, you gave him an 8 last time, Tom, so that's one of the biggest falls from grace we've had so far.
Blimey.
What do you think it is that's made that was go down so much for you?
I think really he burst onto the scene, didn't he, with Bahrain, for example, and since then he's been a driver that I easily forget about, really. He's not really threatened, I think, in terms of, I don't back him, let's say, to go from P15 to P9, or I don't back him to really carve his way through the grid. But then again, as a debutant, you don't really expect that, do you? So I think I was maybe just getting a little bit high off the fact that he had started off so well, but I think we then saw the crushing inevitability of the sort of fact that once a driver starts off well and a team starts off well, that doesn't always translate in the wider term. But sure, going from 8 to 5 makes it sound like I hate the bloke now, but I think he's done fairly well for a driver that's in a competent car of Alfa Romeo. Perhaps he could be a little higher if I were to be really critical, but he's done far better than other debutants, I think, when it comes to not only that team, but the sport more generally.
I think it's tricky to judge his season because, I don't know about the rest of you lot, but my expectations for him weren't, extremely high because, yes, he did well in F2, but he came, third in the end behind, I want to say, Piastri and Schwartzman, and it was his 4th year in F2. So, by that stage, you're like, well, if you hadn't shown anything by now, then surely you wouldn't have got to F1. Now, I think part of the reason for him being in F1, clearly, we have to allow the factor of his nationality and the fact there's a huge Chinese market to tap into, both via the races that are held in China and also the fact there's now a Chinese F1 driver. But I think overall he's probably exceeded my without sounding harsh, which I'm going to now sound harsh anyway, he's exceeded my expectations because I thought he'd be dire, but he's not been nowhere near as dire as I thought because he scored points in his debut. He's shown decent pace. The points deficit to Bottas looks pretty gnarly, I can't lie, it's a big one. But he has been unlucky. He's had more mechanical retirements than any other driver on the grid. And he's been in the points on a couple of those occasions. Notably Azerbaijan, where he was racing with Gasly and Vettel when he retired, and they went on to finish 5th and 6th. So he could have been on for an absolute barnstormer of a result had his car kept together then. And we may be viewing his season completely differently. But Canada 8th place, strong result. And I wonder whether, he sort of, again, it's the same with Bottas in that the car has not helped them in recent races. And I wonder if his crash he had at Silverstone, lest we forget, a huge, monstrous crash, lest we forget, I don't know if that's had an impact on him over the races since. Now, racing drivers will compartmentalise it and just be like, well, you know what, that's racing, I'm going to get on with it. But when you have a crash like that and come unscathed from it, you must have a bit of a mixture of relief and everything running through your veins. So I wonder if that has had an impact on him in recent races. But overall, again, pretty average season. I'd put him on a par with Tsunoda, so a 5 for me.
Oh, would you look at that, Angus? I was really struggling then to give him a score. I was like, I'll give him a 4. But you've raised me up half a point with those excellent points. I'm giving him a 4.5, which I think is fair. I mean, yes, this is his first season. Absolutely, to score points on your debut is fantastic. I think he's going to struggle a bit in the Alfa Romeo, and he's had a lot of problems this season. But to be honest, I think you reminded me then quite nicely of actually his successes. So I think a 4.5 is fair in terms of how well he's doing. He's not as good as Bottas this year, and that's a real shame. But then that's reflective in the fact that, I scored Bottas a 7.5, and I think he's doing amazing. So Tsunoda has a lot to prove still, but he is going a long way to prove it. And I think that in itself might bump him up a good couple of points in the end of the season if he's consistent in actually getting in the fights and bringing that car up to the right places, even if he then goes on to retire because of a mechanical fault. The fact is he was there in and amongst it. So 4.5 from me for that one.
And we're nearly there. We now go down to Lance Stroll. I'm giving him a 2 out of 10. It is his 5th season in Formula 1. He's got points 4 times out of 13. He's 18th at the moment with 4 points. He's below a debutant in Formula 1. He's below many a driver who were in their 2nd or 3rd season. Why is the man in Formula 1? He's 12 points off Vettel. Need I say more?
2. Oh wow. Stroll. Excellent points you've got there, Tom. I think Stroll has had an odd season. Actually, he's clearly the car isn't very good, in any shape or form, and they themselves at Aston Martin have decided halfway through to redesign the car, which is, I would say, a bold move. It's not often they do that. But, Stroll has managed to get 4 points, so that's not, at least he's got points, which makes him better than other drivers we've had in the championship before and maybe current. But those points have all come from the fact that he's finished in 10th place, which isn't a respectable thing to do now I think about it for the Aston Martin, which would be terrible. I'm not going to give him a 2, I'm going to give him a 3. The Aston Martin has been a pretty poor car, and he has managed to get that thing into points, which, is a pretty impressive thing to do. But he's not blown me away. So, I'm using impressive in a very loose term now. I'm just being nice. So, yeah, I would say a 3. But Lance Stroll, if he was in any other car, I would say that his time is coming to an end in Formula 1. But luckily, his dad owns the team. So, he's safe.
4 out of 10. His results are okay. He's been what I'd describe as I will admit the last couple of races I've been doing other things at the time, and I've been checking the live timing screens, and whether it's because of like the sequences of pit stops that he ends up in a loftier position, he flirts with the points more than he used to. But that's about all I can say for him. So yeah. 4 out of 10. 4 out of 10.
I don't like the idea of Stroll flirting.
And we're nearly there. It's unfortunately a Williams driver, one of 2. You've guessed it, Alex Albon. I'm going to give him a 6. And you may think that's very nice of you, Tom. He's only scored points in 2 races out of 13, but I think he's done a pretty good job in terms of replacing George Russell. There's no doubt the Williams car is one of, if not the worst on the grid, really. And yes, there is a sizable gap of 17 points from themselves to Aston Martin, but I think really he is integral to all things good in this team. And I mean that because he brings a lot of experience from the Red Bull and Red Bull Academy days, but also realistically, we'll get onto him later, but Latifi is not too much better than Stroll in my mind. You need someone with racing craft and ability and to stay in there, really, to make sure the team kicks on. I think him signing that contract, the multi-year contract with Williams, gives me hope that Williams can one day get themselves off the foot of the table, really. So, more to do, but I think he's shown me why he deserves to be back in Formula 1 and to be a team leader again.
Quite agree, actually. And Albon, although he's not got many points, has done some incredible drives. Australia, 20th to 10th. Then in Italy, 18th to 11th. Miami, 18th to 9th. That's nuts. Azerbaijan, 17th to 12th. Fantastic. Those are quality drives. And I think when you go back and look at this season, I think will be quite favourable to Albon. I quite agree, Tom. Great score from you as a 6. I'm not going to be quite that generous. I'm going to give him a 5. I think he's absolutely proving his place back in the sport. Good on Albon. So yeah, I'm going to give him a 5. I'm so pleased he's back. Maybe I'm just being nice because I like Albon. But hey, my score. So you disagree? Let us know. I'm sure you will.
I'm going to give him a 7. Now that may surprise some people. May surprise some people because for a man who's 19th in the Drivers' Championship, and 7s we don't hand those out lightly. But For me, I gave Bottas and Magnussen a 7 for strong performances this season in cars which realistically are in the bottom half of the grid overall. And for me, Albon has to fit into that. I think his early season performances, if he'd carried his early season consistency on throughout the season, I could maybe bump him up, but I think he has dropped off a tiny bit. A bit like Bottas and Magnussen, like they've taken advantage of some early unreliability amongst the field, and they've managed to get themselves some good positions. Albon certainly, I thought his drive in Australia, which lest we forget, 20th to 10th Tristan, but if we remind ourselves as well, it was 56 laps on a set of tyres, pitting on the penultimate lap, and doing a one lap, getting up to 7th and doing a 1 lap dash just ahead of, it was Guan Yu Zhou I've got here, who finished behind him. So 7 for me. Also, let's not forget the fact that he has walked into a team where Nicholas Latifi said that he could take a leading role this year, and Albon has absolutely slapped him up. He's winning 11-1 in qualifying sessions where they've both taken part without penalties. So he's fully taken control of that team. He's even been told, he's clearly very popular within the team. His team principal, Jost Capito, has even said, "Oh, he's very good, but he's still a bit too nice." So, that would be his one thing to bump up his rating as well. But I think, in all seriousness, he's had a very good season. Year out of F1. Admittedly, a year out with a heavy amount of testing in the championship-winning Red Bull. But still, solid job from Albon. So 7 for me.
Well, we're running out of time, so we'll finally get on to Nicholas Latifi. Our thoughts on him. He's 20th out of 21st, but we're not getting on to Nico Hülkenberg because, of course, he only raced in 2 races. But Latifi, our thoughts.
Latifi's impact on the races has been, unfortunately, a continuation of him causing trouble. I don't think he's particularly impressed me this year. I don't think he will impress me for the rest of the year. I'm going to give him a 2 out of 10. I think he won't be in the sport for much longer, but I wish him all the best in IndyCar.
What does it say that there's an argument for giving Nico Hülkenberg a higher rating than Nicholas Latifi, even though Hülkenberg took part in just 2 races? That says a lot, I feel. I would say Latifi, I'm not a completely horrible person, so I'll give him a 3. I think 2 is just cruel. 3 is justified. So he hasn't had any standout. No, he has actually. The one standout he had, he got into Q3 at Silverstone in the wet. How on earth has he done that? Fair play to him, but otherwise, he won't be in the sport much longer. Considering, one, there is a clear deficit between the talent he's showing and the money he brings, in terms of there also being... You sometimes get a situation where a driver like Latifi is not playing at their best, but there aren't many apt replacements. It happened a bit with Marcus Ericsson at Sauber or Pastor Maldonado at Lotus. You were well, then they're a bit average, but there's no real standout replacements. There are several replacements possibly for Latifi at Williams now. So, yeah, 3 out of 10 for me.
Yeah, I'm going to give him 3 as well. The only reason he's higher than Stroll is because this is but his 3rd year in Formula 1. And I'll give him 2 more before I downgrade him. But hopefully I don't see him have 5 years in Formula 1 because he doesn't look remotely close to finishing in the points. He never really has. Of course, you can say that's somewhat due to the car, of course, but he has been miles off the pace when it comes to even his teammate. And if that's the case, then I think it's really the writing's on the wall and it's time for him to go, really. Sorry about that. And what you say there, with someone like Nick de Vries hovering around waiting for a seat in the Mercedes Academy or family, and when you consider that if Williams are to continue with the Mercedes engine, that aligns in terms of the politics of Formula 1, I think they'd be crazy not to go for him, really. And it seems that's all we got time for in terms of episode 26 of F1 in Review. Thank you very much for listening to part 2 of our mid-season driver review episode on your preferred podcast provider if you're listening via that, or on River Radio, be that live or via the listen back feature. A reminder that you can follow myself and Tristan individually on Twitter, as well as the F1 in Review account. And Formula 1 returns this weekend. We are going to Spa. Hopefully not for the last time. Qualifying is at 3 PM, that's British summer time, on the Saturday, and the race at 2 PM on the Sunday, once again British summer time in terms of that. And it's forecast to rain on both the days of qualifying and race, but as we mentioned earlier, hopefully not too much rain to wash away the prospect of 4 points to the winner. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll be back next week to discuss all the fallout from Spa and whether some have been able to turn it around and whether others have fallen below par again.